Welcome to Berkeley City Hall, where I am so thrilled to be speaking to our mayor and to be talking about artist housing and to see what we can do in the future to have affordable housing for artists and people in the arts in Berkeley. Welcome, Jesse.
Thank you so much, Susan, for having me. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for all that you do for our arts community and for the city of Berkeley as a whole. I'm just so pleased that you have been our arts ambassador for a number of years, working to recognize many artists and intellectuals in our community and really give focus and support for our arts organizations and the cultural life of our city. So I just want to thank you so much for all that you do, and it's really a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you. This program is a new thing, a relatively new thing, and it puts out more information about the arts, and it's been great.
Wonderful.
So, what's happening?
Well, we know that Berkeley and the entire Bay Area is facing a housing affordability crisis.
Yeah.
And we're not just seeing students and working families being pushed out of our city, but artists. We know that Mildred Howard, who was a longtime Berkeley resident, her mother, Mabel Howard, was integral in undergrounding the BART tracks in South Berkeley, and was a major community leader in the South Berkeley and the African American community. That Mildred was pushed out of Berkeley because of the rising costs of housing and affordable workspace in our city. And I think she's a prime example of what we're really struggling with, which is the exodus of the cultural life of our city as housing costs continue to increase. And so it's essential that as we're working to develop policies and as we're working to build new affordable housing, that we prioritize housing and workspace for our artists. And so for me, that's one of my top priorities.
Terrific.
And as we're working to implement our new Measure O bond program, the voters of Berkeley were so generous to approving $135 million in funding for affordable housing that we do need to give some emphasis for artists and arts organizations.
Good. We feel the same way. No, that's great. And so, and it's all the arts. I mean, sometimes people think art is somebody with a paintbrush, and it is, but there are poets and there are musicians, and there are also people that work for art organizations that often are very low income and want to keep doing the wonderful cultural work they're doing. I mean, people want to live here because of the art and culture, and then we've got to keep that in the community.
No, we have hundreds of arts organizations in Berkeley. It contributes $165 million to our local economy, so it's not only so important to it's making Berkeley such a diverse and vibrant and dynamic community to live in, but also it's really important for our tax base. So, you know, we need to continue to prioritize the arts. That's why I'm glad that the council, at my urging, not only in 2017, but this year, increased our arts grants to $500,000, giving us the most money we've ever had to provide more support for arts organizations and individual artists. And the work the Arts Commission's done to broaden the eligibility of the Arts Grants program to all sorts of different artists and arts organizations of all sizes is so essential. And so we need to continue that investment, to continue to grow our funding for the arts, and to provide space for people. And it's not just visual artists, it's performing arts organizations as well who are having a hard time finding space in our community. So I think we want to have a conversation with our Arts Commission and with the arts community, particularly the Berkeley Cultural Trust, about how we can provide capital funding to enable arts organizations to stay in our city.
Great, great. And I can't help but mention the fact that we're talking about maybe more funding in the future. I mean, going up from $500,000. I mean, our goal is like $1 million, but moving along on in that direction. And I want to tell people that on September 17th, the cultural plan will come to the City Council, and please be there to support it, and artist housing is a very integral part of that. It's
one of the main priorities in the plan. And certainly that it's what I've heard from artists in our community, and it really, I think, prioritizing affordable housing and live workspace for artists is essential and needs to be part of our affordable housing strategy.
Great, it is then. Yay! Okay, so is there anything else you want, I mean, is there anything you want to tell us about you in particular?
Sure. Well, it's been such a pleasure to be Mayor Berkeley. I'm approaching my 3rd year in office. And I actually got started in political activism at the age of 9 years old, working to name a street in my hometown of San Francisco after my hero, Cesar Chavez. And that started a lifelong commitment to political activism and working to make change within government. And I was very fortunate to serve the Berkeley community as a city council member representing downtown Berkeley, where we have a number of arts organizations located in our downtown arts district. So I have long been a supporter of the arts and recognize the importance of supporting our arts community, which is not only essential to the kind of the soul of our city. I mean, I think the arts and the economic and cultural diversity of Berkeley is the soul of Berkeley.
Yeah.
We need to preserve that, but also is so essential to our economic development as a community. And so as mayor, I have really made supporting the arts, whether it's through our money from our short-term rental tax going towards arts funding, whether it's increasing the arts grants, and then now hopefully working with the commission to look at how we can implement the policies of the arts and culture plan that we'll be discussing on September 17th. I really think preserving the arts, preserving our small businesses, and the economic and cultural diversity is so essential now, as Berkeley is going through a lot of changes. I mean, Berkeley is really changing very quickly. And while change is inevitable, we need to make sure that change happens in a way that preserves what makes Berkeley such an amazing and special place.
Great.
And I think the arts are one component of that.
Great. That's my mayor. Thank you. So again, people should come and make their voices heard and with the plan on September 17th. And it's great. We're going to move into the future full of the arts.
Yeah, and the changes that are happening in Berkeley, and if I may elaborate on that, certainly we have a lot more people coming to Berkeley. We have more students coming to Berkeley. We're building more housing, but it's not necessarily affordable for artists and working families and students. And so we really need to focus, as we are building new housing and as we're creating housing policy, that we are prioritizing affordable housing.
Absolutely, absolutely. How do you see that happening?
Well, I think part of it is through the funding the city provides.
Yeah.
And the Measure O bond is really critical, and we need to try to find more local funds and state and regional funds to create affordable housing.
Right.
We need to look at different models, like using land trusts and limited equity cooperatives to preserve affordable housing and to maintain long-term affordability. This sort of model of, community control of an ownership of housing is something that's not unique to Berkeley. It happens throughout the world, in Europe and different parts of the country. Right. We know Berkeley has a long history of supporting collectives and supporting alternative models towards ownership and control of housing. Yeah. That's got to be part of it too. How do we retain ownership and democratic control of housing?
Right.
And we need to look at how we get developers, particularly in West Berkeley as they're building projects, to dedicate affordable live-work space for artists.
Yeah. Last question. Are there regulations now that exist that protect artists who are in West Berkeley?
Yeah, there are rules around protecting existing live-work space, what are called protected spaces, but we need to do a better job of actually enforcing those laws.
I see.
And I think what we also need to consider is how we can require through laws in West Berkeley that there be a certain amount of space dedicated for affordable live-work space.
Yeah.
Because it's the only way we're going to get, when new projects are built, that actual space dedicated for artists to be able to remain in their community. So part of it is protecting existing space, and how do we create new space that's affordable.
Great, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great pleasure.
Thank you.
We'll be back with our next guest, and again, thank you. And Welcome to Bay Area Art Beat. We have some very wonderful guests. Kim Ano, who is Vice President of the Art Commission and has been on the art scene, and a big part of the art scene in Berkeley for a long time, and can tell us a lot about what's happening. A major thing that's coming up on September 17th is the housing component of the cultural plan will be discussed at the City Council. Go to it. Kim, first tell us a little bit about yourself and then tell us about what you've been doing and what's happening.
I'm an artist. I'm a visual artist and a filmmaker, and I'm making my first feature documentary right now, which is very exciting. And I'm also vice chair of the Civic Arts Commission and a professor at the California College of the Arts.
Great.
We, at the Arts Commission, we have been really focused on trying to help artists both get new funding streams and be able to have better incomes through their positions, but also now we are really working on affordable housing for artists. For decades, there's been displacement of our artists, and in the city of Berkeley, we have actually generated millions, multiple tens of millions of dollars into the city for the economic engine. And yet our artists are being more and more threatened and displaced with their housing and their workspace. And for instance, there is an ordinance that was passed through a plan of the West Berkeley plan to protect artist spaces, which is around live-work issues. And there have been some spaces that have been protected, but there's been a lot that we have lost. For instance, Nexus used to be this artist group that had space, and they were displaced, and what moved in were artisans, cooking artisans, which we love cooking and we love artisans who cook, but our visual artists were sacrificed to bring those people in.
Yeah.
And recently Michael Christian, who's one of the most accomplished sculptors in the city of Berkeley, has a piece down on the Bart Plaza.
Right.
And he just got evicted, and he, not only was it his space, but he also subleased to at least 12 other artists. So 15 artists got displaced in the last few weeks in West Berkeley.
Is there anything that can be done about that now?
It's done. They're out.
Somebody
out.
sold the building? Or?
I don't know what is happening now with that particular building, but I know that there is a plan that says you have to have artisanal activity in that space or light industrial. So I think that the developers were interested in that being housing. So there may be some kind of, how can I say, sort of toggle or fight to make that to be housing, because they'll make a pretty penny on the housing, but they won't make that much on light industrial or artisanal activities. So we're not sure what's going to happen in that space, but all these are examples that our artists are being constantly displaced. I remember Poetry Flash had an office in Berkeley for decades, and then they got displaced.
No, they're still here, but they
good.
keep raising the rent to like over $3,000 for this big room and the loft upstairs, and that's something I'd love to see us be able to do something about, to save the spaces of the people who are here.
Poetry Flash, I think was founded 30 years ago at least.
Yeah, and it's international. I mean,
and they've been really responsible for keeping together the interest and the dynamics around poetry in the whole greater Bay Area region.
Yeah.
And to lose them out of Berkeley would be a tragedy. And all these things are happening more and more. And we really, as cultural workers and artists, we don't have pensions, we don't have unions. A lot of people don't get raises in the positions that they're in. They're in those positions out of passion. And they provide a kind of bridge in society that really grapples with some of the harder issues. For example, recently I've been contracted to do something around climate change and sea level rise because nobody could come together as a group and kind of figure out what to do.
Yeah.
And so this was in another city, but an artist will bring a vision that allows the society and the community to kind of handle really difficult problems.
Right.
Another example is gun violence. There's been some shows around gun violence that have brought the issue forward and kind of exemplified or pictured what you can do with your gun if it's not being used to kill somebody.
Yeah. I want to do a show on art and social justice. I mean, the different areas that are being addressed in art, and I think that's really, really important. And artist housing, you said like cultural workers, that's part of, when we say artist housing, this is a broad term that covers anybody that's working in the arts, is that right? I mean,
yes, I think all artists are threatened with displacement, no matter what kind of art they're doing.
Right.
Another example is the cannabis industry. In Oakland, displaced a whole entire warehouse full of artists living and working for 30 years in their warehouse. And those people got evicted, and now it's a cannabis manufacturing plant. And it's not that we're against cannabis manufacturers, it's that we want to be able to protect our space and our place in the society here, especially in the city of Berkeley.
Yeah, yeah. I will, so is there anything on track that might be coming along that could accommodate this?
So there are some interesting projects. I mean, and also artist affordable housing is not a new concept. It's happening in San Francisco through Project Artaud, for instance. Yeah. In Emeryville, there's the cooperative. There's many different buildings and places that artists have been able to kind of get into to protect and have some kind of areas where their rent is not going to go sky high.
Right.
Limited equity co-ops is one.
Right. Thank you. This goes very fast.
Sorry.
And you have wonderful things to say. So this is a to be continued conversation, obviously, until we get our artist housing. And yes, that's all I'll say right now. But thank you very, very much. Time goes quickly.
I just want to say one more thing is that September 17th is the cultural plan unveiling for the city of Berkeley. At City Council, we welcome everyone to come and hear about it.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. We'll be back with our next guest shortly. Welcome back to Bay Area Art Beat. Our last guest is the vice president, the vice chair of the Measure O committee, and it looks like Measure O is going to have a lot to do with what kind of affordable housing and what kind of housing for artists we're going to have in Berkeley. And Igor, thank you so much for being with us. And I'm going to ask you to just tell us a little bit about you and what got you to where you are now, and then a little bit about how the Measure O process is going to work.
Well, thank you so much, Susan, for not just the opportunity to be on your show, but your many decades of everything that you have contributed to the quality of life and the arts community in particular within the city of Berkeley.
Thank you.
My name is Igor Tregup. It has been my privilege to serve the Berkeley community in a variety of roles, and currently I am the vice chair of the Measure O Oversight Committee, which I will talk about. how I came into this work and into the work of housing in general is embedded in my lived experience. I'm an immigrant who moved through 4 different countries by the time that I was 10 years old.
Wow.
When I celebrated my 8th birthday, by that time I'd probably lived in as many places as the years that I have had.
Wow.
And while that was a wonderful experience, I also remember how difficult it was every single time that I made a new set of friends, that I found a sense of place in a community that I could adopt as my own. Once again, I had to be uprooted and start anew. And what we're up against, so many of us in this community right now, at a time when the cost of housing and the cost of living is through the roof. We're facing an unprecedented housing affordability crisis. And so many of our neighbors are struggling to make ends meet so that they are able to remain in this community in which they have grown up or to which they have moved, but it's their sense of place. So my work is to make sure that these neighbors are able to stay in the same place and not have to spend all of their life savings just to be there, and not have to work multiple jobs just to remain housed. It is also to try to do right by those in our community who have been displaced and currently live sometimes hours, many miles away from where they started, or do not have a roof over their head, to make sure that they also have a place that they can come back to for Berkeley that we can all call home. I would love to tell you about the Measure All committee. And first, let me start by saying how proud I am of Berkeley voters who voted overwhelmingly to approve this particular bond, which is a $135 million bond over its lifetime, and a variety of other housing ballot measures that we have put on the ballot over the last 5 years.
Okay, great. And I want to be sure that artists are in the category of people with special needs or people that need to be really considered. I mean, since they're such an important part of the heart of Berkeley, that and so many artists or people in the doing cultural work in the arts are priced out of Berkeley. It's the art and culture is the heart of Berkeley, and we have to make sure that these people are able to stay. But there are proposals coming forth. You said to me, can an individual, do you have to do it as a, well, tell me people who can apply, because the first round was in August, and then there are 2 more, right?
That is correct. So there will be 2 additional opportunities to apply, put forth a request for proposal, to put forth a proposal. We have $135 million that we are essentially splitting roughly 3 ways. There have been a little bit under $20 million that has already been committed to 2 worthwhile affordable housing projects, one for seniors and one for those who are currently unhoused. There is an additional $14 million that the application for it just closed on August 14th.
Okay.
And our committee, actually a subcommittee of the Measure All Oversight Committee, and I do serve on that subcommittee, will be meeting starting next month to look at which proposals have come in. If you have not had an opportunity yet to submit your proposal, worry not, because there are going to be 2 other opportunities, and each one will be an issuance of roughly $35 million at a time. How do you apply? Well, we specifically for the criteria that we put forth for this request for proposals, and that I imagine we are likely to put forth for the other two issuances. They are very agnostic as to who applies and how they apply. It's going to be very open-ended, but the arts community absolutely should have a seat at that table, and I encourage you to
Good.
put
Well,
in your
you hear
request.
people, you hear everybody out there. No, I think that it's great to hear that you consider that, and we will let people know that proposals still can be submitted, two more rounds of proposals, and to really give this a lot of thought.
I would personally love for the next project that we fund to support the arts community. When I go around the city, I see how much those who are contributing to the arts, many of them struggle to make
Yeah.
ends meet.
Yeah.
And within the Bay Area as a whole, we have been losing artists at alarming rates. We have
Yeah.
been losing
Yeah.
musicians at alarming rates.
Yeah.
And that is really a tragedy, because those are the folks that with
Right.
their creativity,
Right.
with their commitment to serving this community,
Yeah.
that's what makes this place so special. I'm very proud of, on the zoning board, having voted to approve projects such as the one going, about to go up right now over the Berkeley Rep, which would provide
Great,
temporary
great,
housing
great.
for playwrights doing work at the
Great,
Berkeley Rep.
great.
But I would like to see something more permanent as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
And so I am throwing down the gauntlet. I
Right.
am asking
Okay,
you all
you guys
to
here.
apply.
Thank you so much for coming. It's been really great talking to you. We'll be back next month with another really interesting program. And I hope to see everybody then. Stay amazed.